Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. This is stage 7 of the Vuelta, España, 190 kilometers, about 120 miles in length. This will complete the first week here at the Vuelta, España, 7 days of racing, 21 stages here at the Grand Tour. So today's stage looks like a perfect stage for breakaways. What I was thinking when I went to bed last night. Thought something different when I woke up this morning and I started seeing the interviews from Mads Pedersen. Now, I told you guys earlier after stage 4 of the Vuelta España that I thought Mads Pedersen would be the golden child to win the sprint competition here at the Vuelta España. I expected him to be able to climb and drop sprinters throughout the Vuelta España on some of the medium mountain stages. But this stage right here wasn't one stage when I went to bed last night that I thought would be a stage that Trek Segafredo, with only 7 riders in the race now because they lost Dan Uhl, the Netherlands rider, to a COVID positive test earlier in the week. So with only 7 riders and not necessarily being the most strongest riders in the world with Trek Segafredo, Mads Pedersen, one of the best in the world, no doubt about that. But when you look at the rest of their squad, it's not like it's a huge powerhouse team. They've been fantastic of doing the last lead-outs for Mads Pedersen, but when you're talking about pulling all day for 190 kilometers and keeping all the attacks at bay throughout the whole stage of today's stage 7, I thought that would be a tall order. But when I'm sitting on the couch, I flip on the screen, and there it is, Mads Pedersen doing an interview. Now, the interview was a little bit comical because the guy interviewing him asked him, basically, if this is a stage for him and does he expect to be in the breakaway today so he can try to get some points and possibly win today's stage and get sprint points at the end of today's stage. Mads Pedersen gives an incredible interview, talks about how in the past he might have been afraid of this climb happening with about 85 kilometers to go, and it'll crest with 60 kilometers to go. It's a monster climb, 22 kilometers long, about 5%, but does have some bigger pitches when we're talking about at the last 7 kilometers of this climb. That'll crest with 60 kilometers to go. So he says in the past he would be worried about a climb like this, but now his form has been exceptionally good throughout this whole 2022 season, and certainly at the Tour de France we saw that with his stage win. He tells the interviewer that this is a stage that is the breakaway is not going to win because Trek Segafredo is going to control this race from start to finish, and he's going to try to drop the sprinters. Doesn't say it quite like that, but that's what he's getting around to. So when the racing starts and the cameras finally come on, we're about 85 kilometers to go in the race. We're already nearing the beginning of this monster climb that's, like I said, about 22 kilometers climb total, but they've been climbing for about 50K. When you go from the bottom of the climb all the way to the top, it's a monster, but the real meat of the climb being the last 22 kilometers. Now it's Trek Segafredo on the front, and they got some help by Bike Exchange. So 2 teams chasing on the front, and up front they're chasing 6 riders up there, and they got some quality riders because Fred Wright from Bahrain Victorious is in there, along with Jesus Herrada from Cofidis, Harry Sweeney from Lotto Soudal, Omar Goldstein from Israel Premier Tech, Samuel Battistella from Astana, and Jimmy Johnson is up there from Alpecin Deceuninck. Now there's a lot of power in this move. But when you go back, you see 2 teams chasing. Now I'm starting to believe Trek Segafredo, they got a shot here of dropping the sprinters once we get into the meat of this climb, the pure sprinters. Talking about riders, of course, like Sam Bennett, 2-time stage winner here. And, of course, Tim Miller, the big-time sprint favorite here when the Vuelta started, along with Pascal Ackermann from UAE Team Emirates. Those 3 riders aren't very good climbers, and when the climb starts proper, of course, it's Tim Miller coming out from the pace of the Trek Segafredo riders up front. After that, we start seeing the flatter Trek Segafredo riders, the bigger ones, start coming off the front. Then we're going to see 2 Trek Segafredo riders get on the front, and it's Juan Pedro Lopez. He's on the front, so Pedro's pulling hard, and he's got some company in the form of Kenny Ellison. You guys remember right on stage 4 was Kenny Ellison doing the lead out there from Mads Pedersen all the way into the finish line when Mads got second on the stage for his third second place finish here at the Vuelta España. Now, with those 2 riding, the problem is we look up at that group of 6 that's going to become 5 later when Omar Goldstein drops out later. They're not gaining much time. So you got 2 pure climbers here with Juan Pedro back there pulling and with Kenny Ellison, and they're not really gaining much time on this front group of 5. So now this is starting to look a little bit different to me when I compare it to that interview there of Mads Pedersen looking so positive And now with their 2 climbers on the front, nothing's really happening. When you look back there at the group, yeah, sure, we saw Tim Miller go out. Pascal Ackermann went out shortly after that with about 10 kilometers still to go on the stage. We saw Chris Froome get dropped at the same point in time when Omar Goldstein, his teammate, got dropped out of the front break. But they're still not bringing time back. And when you look at the front, there's really only 4 Trek Segafredo riders up there. Because along with the 2 riders pulling, you got Antonio there, and then you have Mads Pedersen on his wheel. So with those 3 or 4 riders from Trek Segafredo, I'm starting to do the math here, and I'm thinking, yo, Mads, what are the plans? What are the Trek Segafredo plans when you get to the top of this KOM? Because if you can't pull this brake back going up this climb, when you go down the descent and it's all downhill into the finish and you're chasing 5 quality riders up front, what is the plans for 2 little climbers who can't bring these 5 guys back on the climb to be able to bring them back on the descent and the flatlands all the way in the finish of today's stage? At this point in time, Trek Segafredo needed to change the MO. Instead, they don't. We're about 7 kilometers, 6.5 maybe from the top of the climb, and all of a sudden, we're going to see Mads Pedersen go up there to Juan Pedro and say, hey, I want some more speed out of here. Kenny Elizon hears the call for more speed, and he starts pulling 100% on the front. Now the Trek Segafredo rider's going hard, but he's only going to do a pull for about 500, maybe a K at the most, and then Kenny Elizon's going to blow and go off to the right side of the peloton. Next up is going to be Juan Pedro. And remember, this kid Juan wore the race leader's pink jersey at the Giro d'Italia. So I'm expecting big pulls here. You look at the visage there of his facial expressions, and Pedro looks like he's hurting big time on the front and going as deep as he possibly can. Finally, he pulls off, and when he does, he pulls off so fast, we'll see a split in the peloton there just up at the front as he's going through the quick step train right behind him as he's spreading around him and opening up a gap up to Antonio and to Mads Pedersen. Now, as we see Quick Step close that gap, they're right back up there, and Antonio's doing a great job, and eventually Sam Bennett goes out the back with just over a kilometer to go. But the problem is the pace is going so hard at the front. Who is left for Trek Segafredo? Again, Mads Pedersen, the DS, is driving the car for Trek Segafredo. What was the plan when you get over the top of the KOM? You only have 1 rider left with Mads Pedersen, and your other riders are going out the back. We get up to the top of the KOM. We see the breakaway specialist up there, and of course is Herrada, the Cofidis Spanish rider that's going to take maximum points at the KOM, and they're going to go over the top, kind of chasing each other for the next 4 kilometers as that group of 5 comes back together about 5 kilometers after the KOM. But they went over the top of the KOM with about a 2 minute 50 second gap on the lead Trek Segafredo peloton behind, which isn't much off of what they started this climb at, because when the beginning of the race they had about a 3 minute 30 second gap. So really they've lost probably 20-30 seconds once this climb started proper to Trek Segafredo. That's not a very big margin when you had pure climbers going back there and you have nobody left at the KOM. So Trek Segafredo going 100% all the way up to the KOM with Antonio, but who's going to do the work afterwards? We look back and we see what's happening in the back of the peloton. It's shattering all over. We look further back from that. It's Sam Bennett. He's got teammates wrapped around him, but he's also got quick step riders, and he's also got a Trek Segafredo rider there. So what are you going to do if you got no teammates up front, Mads, and you got teammates in the back? You got to shut it down. You got to let the groups come back together, because otherwise your only other hope is that some other team's going to come up there and start chasing with you. They don't, and up front going down the descent is Trek Segafredo, still Antonio on the front, Tibieri, and he's not able to bring back that group of 5, and he's not making any inroads. Now we look further back as we go down the descent. There it is, Sam Bennett. He's got his teammates with him, and they're wrapped around. They'll bring him back on with about 50 kilometers to go. Now, just over 40 kilometers to go, Trek Segafredo finally hit the abort button here. They should have did it a long time ago when they were going up the climb. Set a smoother pace up that climb, kept all the sprinters together, or just let the break go and give away all the sprint point competitions and give away any chance of winning the stage. But not allowing Sam Bennett to have any chance of gaining any sprint points on today's stage either. Because one thing's for certain, when they were going up that big monster climb, Sam Bennett held on all the way to just over a K to go from the top of the KOM. So you know there's a good chance he's going to get back on when you only have 1 Trek Segafredo rider pulling on the front. So just over 40 kilometers to go, Trek Segafredo, like I said, they pull the plug. And then we see the quick step guys all converge to the front to slow everything down, a little chit-chatting going on, but only for about 100 meters, because now all of a sudden we see the next team that wants to get on the front. It's Arkea Samsic and Bike Exchange. Bike Exchange is starting to get back into the work, and they're starting to pull hard. Now we're starting to see the time gap drop to that group up front. Time gap gets down around 2 minutes, and then at 20 kilometers to go, the gap's at 1.5 minutes. Now, if the group behind in the peloton can get organized and everyone can start working together, they can possibly bring this group back still. When we're talking about 20 kilometers to go, 15K to go, and the gap is 1 minute and 20 seconds, and basically it's 5 riders up front being chased by 5 riders back in the peloton. Trek Segafredo did get back in the mix at this point in time, but every time a rider comes to the front of the peloton, they lose a rider at the front, so it's really only 4 or 5 chasing 5 up front at any point in time. Now with 10 kilometers to go, when the gap is still about a minute, there's a chance, but it's looking really slim at this point in time. When we get into 5 kilometers to go, we know the race is over because the gap is still 40, 50 seconds, and you're not going to bring back these 5 guys unless they start playing some games up front. Now, it's always possible they could start attacking each other, but the guys, every time the camera comes up to them, we see them working well together and always rotating through. And it's not until about 1.2, 1.3 kilometers that all of a sudden we see the Astana rider, Battistella, that starts throwing in the first little games. He sits on the back and won't rotate through. And now we see up front, it's Fred Wright taking a pull. Next guy to come through, Harry Sweeney from Lotto Soudal. He'll do a short pull. And then there'll be a half-hearted attack from Jimmy Johnson, Alpecin de Koenig. He didn't put in much of an effort. Barely didn't even get a gap. And when he saw that, he moved over to the right side of the road and looked back over his shoulder. And that's when he stops pulling. And all of a sudden, with 600 meters to go, it's Fred Wright, Bahrain victorious, that gets on the front. Now, let me remind you guys, 2 stages ago, when it was Fred Wright in the breakaway and he was getting attacked left and right with about 40 kilometers to go, the whole last 28 kilometers of that course, he was getting beat up and abused all over the place as he was trying to win the stage and possibly take the race leader's red jersey. That didn't happen 2 stages ago, but now he's on the front with 600 meters to go for Bahrain victorious. He's pulling on the right side of the road, always looking over his shoulder, checking out and seeing what's happening. He's got riders all over his wheel because it's Jimmy Johnson directly locked on his wheel. Harry Sweeney from Lotto Soudal sitting third. 4th wheel is the Cofidis rider Harada. 5th wheel, Battistella, who started all the games playing with over a kilometer out, hasn't taken a pull at all. Now we start going into 400 meters as the road bends right. It's also got a little dip and a little rise, and still it's Fred Wright on the front with 250 meters to go. Fred Wright looks over his shoulder. He sees his Jimmy Johnson getting ready to start a sprint, so Fred Wright starts before him, and the Bahrain victorious is going full gas with about 250 meters to go. He'll go up over the bump. He'll start down the slight little descent, and this is going to be a problem for Fred Wright because the riders in the back now who have been sitting on since 600-700 meters to go, now all of a sudden they're getting a little bit of a draft as the speed starts picking up because up front Fred Wright's going 100%. Jimmy Johnson can't hold the pace, and we see Harada, who jumped out to the left side. He started to pass Harry Sweeney. Now he's passing the Alpecin de Koenig rider, and as the Alpecin de Koenig rider, Jimmy Johnson's fading. There we see it's Harada that gets a great draft, and now all of a sudden he's starting to run up on Fred Wright with the speed coming off that little descent. It's going to pick back up with about 50 meters to go. We see the film at 50 meters. There it is. Harada's pulled off left. He's even now with Fred Wright, and coming on the right side of Wright, who'd followed that speed there of Harada. Now he's slingshotting through the right there of Fred Wright, and it's a 3-way battle going to the line. 25 meters to go. We know Fred Wright's not going to win the stage, but it's a bike throw at the line for Harada. Cofidis that takes the win by a bike throw. Second on the stage, the Astana rider Battistella. Third on the stage, Fred Wright. 4th on the stage, Jimmy Johnson. And 5th on today's stage, 7 of the Vuelta a España, is going to be Harry Sweeney, the Australian rider. Now, after the finish line, Harada's all in tears, emotional, getting hugs and kisses from his swan year and from his teammates. Now, let me tell you a quick little story, because when I was with Radio Shack and I won the Vuelta in 2013, I was kissing everyone throughout that whole month of racing. And Johan Bernil would call me up all the time at night and be like, "Why are you kissing everyone? They don't kiss in Spain." Well, Johan Bernil, they're kissing everybody here. Harada's getting kissed and molested from his soigneur, and he's getting kissed from his teammates. So it made me laugh and giggle while I was sitting on the couch thinking of Johan Bernal during 2013, always calling me up while I'm kissing everyone. And I said, Johan Bernal, at these kind of moments, I'm kissing everyone. Males, females, babies, kids, grandmas, grandpas, everybody that's around me is getting kissed. That's just the way it is. So this reassures me that whatever I did in 2013 with all those kisses and all those hugs, I must have been right, because Harada won and he's doing the exact same thing. Congratulations to Team Cofidis for winning a magnificent stage, holding off all the sprinter teams back there, the knuckleheads from Trek Segafredo, who clearly just did not understand the tactics of how to bring a group back. When you got a weaker team, you got to keep the whole group together. Now, when we go back to the favorites back there sprinting into the finish, guess who won the sprint for 6th? Sam Bennett. Bora Hansgrohe took 6th place, so he took sprint points away from Mads Pedersen, who I believe, if I remember right, finished 9th on the stage. That means Trek Segafredo worked all day on today's stage and gave up the opportunity of gaining more points on Sam Bennett by not being able to keep him off the back, and then pulling all the way to the finish so he can gain some more points on the sprint competition. Much like Bora Hansgrohe did on stage 4 when they pulled all day long, and then it was Mads Pedersen who dropped Sam Bennett and took points over him on stage 4. Well, now it's reversed, and so everything's about even Steven right now on stage 7 when we're talking about the battle for the sprint points competition. Race leaders jersey, Quick Step got a day off and an easy day of riding. When I saw the interview from Remco Evenepoel, he said he loved how it worked, because now all his guys can get a little bit of recovery on today's stage 7 and get ready for the big showdown on tomorrow's weekend race, and starting on Saturday and finishing on Sunday, of course, because that's the weekend, and both stages have summit finishes. Now, one thing about today's stage when it comes to Quick Step, they had 3 guys back there with Sam Bennett getting dropped on that climb. So when we look at tomorrow's stage and you realize Quick Step didn't have to pull at all throughout today's stage, still lost 3 guys on a pretty easy climb, we can understand that when we watch tomorrow's stage, if there's any threat in the general classification going up in those early breaks, that Quick Step could be in big trouble. Now we're going to see a technical battle when we get on the last mountain stages on Saturday and Sunday. So make sure you guys like and subscribe. There's going to be all kinds of action happening tomorrow and Sunday, and I'll see you on the next edition of the Butterfly Effect.